Hi, good morning, Sarah. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you, Sam. Yourself?
I'm fine, thank you. So, before preparing this podcast and this episode of the podcast we're going to have together, you chose the first one to be different segments of law and disrupting conventions of multi-practice. And just before I started recording, you said that some people think if you start off as a corporate lawyer, you're going to spend the rest of your life being a corporate lawyer. And at one point, I had similar views, but you do object to these views. So why is it?
Look, for me, your first skill set, and it's a transferable skill set, is to be a lawyer. And what does that break down to, right? You need critical analysis, you need reasoning, you need logic, you need to know the area of law, so continuous learning. And lawyers are tasked, or lawyers are taught to get to the heart of an issue and deal with it and provide clarity to complexity. Now, that skill set, that basic skill set, is transferable in different
Mm.
areas of law. What lacks is you need to know the area of law. And people stay in a box and say, if I'm doing corporate, I'll do that for the rest of my natural life because that's how traditionally practice has been. And in a lot of kind of institutions and firms, you are boxed into one area of law. But let's go back. When we were at law school, we learn different areas of law. We learn it well. We
Every
get good
semester.
grades. So why should we limit ourselves to just one area in practice? I don't agree with that.
Yeah, and it was like every few months you had to learn a new area of law. But later on in practice, because at law schools you probably had to learn to a certain extent, and then in practice you see different aspects of the area of law you're covering. And sometimes it is said that if you shift into another area of law, it is not impossible, but sometimes you have to downgrade your position. So let's say you're a senior associate doing property law, and then one point you discover that I did not want to spend the rest of my life doing property law. I probably don't want to do commercial contracts. But then you would not move into a different firm or stay within the firm as a senior associate. You probably downgrade. Do you disagree with that as well?
I'm not sure that I'd use the word downgrade. Let me explain you why. The responsibility from the lawyer is not just I wake up and I decide one day I want to do a different area of law, I'm done with doing a certain area.
Mm.
You have a responsibility professionally, ethically to your client to continuously learn and evolve. You can't just start a new area of law if you don't know the area of law, right? So if
Mhm.
you, given that example, a senior associate who wants to do a different area of law needs to vest in themselves, needs to make sure they learn that area of law, needs to make sure that they either enroll on a course or do the requisite reading or have hands-on experience to the degree that they can comfortably practice that area, right? So yes, I understand the specialism and I don't detract from that. I'm not saying that people shouldn't specialize. And I understand clients sometimes want specialists. They want to know somebody's done this for, 10 years, 15 years. They know every angle, they know every strategy in this particular area. But I can only talk from my own experience. If I have a real interest in an area of law, how do I don't, I, and I'm a CEO and a founder of a law firm, but I don't agree that I have to now downgrade myself and become like an associate to practice, for example, fashion law or sports law or tech, for example. And I've been doing those for a few years. I just make sure I'm on top of the game. And therefore, when I'm offering a service, it's done with the same value a client can expect for me to practice and expertise to practice another area of law. And what does that mean? I have to put the work in outside of
Speaking
hours.
Speaking of fashion law, by the way, I had something in mind, and I wanted to talk to you about fashion law in specific and like other areas of law that are emerging nowadays, and even sports law. Do you notice that probably if you want to do fashion law, if someone studied like law 15, 20 years ago, fashion law was not yet a title on its own. Probably it is now. It used to go under entertainment law and a few other areas of law, which are basically probably contract law with some
Absolutely.
intellectual
Yeah.
property, but focused into the fashion industry. So
It's just a nice title. What is fashion law? It's exactly what you said. It's contracts, it's franchising, it's distribution, it's IP. There's not a particular segment that's just fashion. So we've all learnt about contracts. Same in sports. What's sports law? Yes, you might need to know the rules. For example, federations, if you want to do arbitration, you need to be registered, you need to be on CAS, etc. But if we rip it back to basics, bring it back, it's all contracts, right? And in fashion, it's all IP. So it wasn't a thing back in the day because it wasn't seen to be, I don't know, respectable. I've had messages worldwide from people who say, we really like what you're doing because growing up, we were told, fashion, good girls don't do fashion. I'm like, well, of course you can. And good girls can do fashion and law. So there are institutes that offer it. I take the point that back in the day, we had very traditional kind of subjects and it wouldn't be on the agenda. And now it is. Even in mainstream universities at the moment, it's not a subject that's, taught much. We haven't introduced it in any of the law schools here, as far as I'm aware, even within the UAE yet. It is being taught, and I'm part of that faculty in Milan, for example. It's been done for a number of years. But I do think that as lawyers, we do need to adapt. We do need to change, but we take the fundamental skill set with us. So people just get put off by the title, but the title, if you strip it back, is the idea of law is basic.
If you bring it back to fundamentals, I might now agree with you because even if you do contract law and franchising distribution, you're effectively, and then you name it fashion law, you're just giving it a title to specialize it by force.
Yeah.
But if you strip it out from the title, you notice yourself doing a bit of everything just into one specific industry. So you could go back and do the same thing in hospitality probably. And then, yeah. So I think, but is this need to specialize, does it go back to clients' needs or regulatory restraints? What do you think causes?
I think it's a bit of both. I think there's a multitude of reasons. I think number one, people like to know, and this is from the client side, that if they come to you or me or anyone as a lawyer, I have X amount of experience in that field. Why is that important? Because it's not always just about the law, is it? Right? Yeah, we can learn the law, but it's about strategy, especially in litigation, for example. When people come to me in disputes, they're not coming because I know the law well or inside out. They're coming because I've got 25 years of strategy. That I know if this decision is taken, it goes that way. I had the ability to foresee. And that comes with practice, right? That doesn't come with just kind of textbook knowledge. So being able to, and you know yourself that what the law says and how it translates into practice are two separate things. So firstly, clients want to know that you have that background. Number two, for law firms and big law, it's the way, the law firms are run. They have departments, specialized departments that give the right offering to clients to say, we have people who have, X amount of years between them in this many jurisdictions just doing this area. So it gives the client some satisfaction that this person knows this area very, very well. But that's not to say someone else can't do it, right?
As in the title. It's a title when they put that this department has combined 150 years of experience. So
in so many jurisdictions.
Yes, across the globe. They get you partners from all around the world, and then all of a sudden you have a department with more than 200 years of experience around the globe.
Around the globe. And that's great. And I don't detract from that. I'm not saying that's wrong. And I understand why lawyers do it. I understand why law firms do it. And it's comfortable. Once you practice one area of law and it's the only area of law you're doing, you get to know all the areas, you're only doing that area, you are comfortable because you don't need to come out of that space. Maybe you don't want to come out of that space, but I'm a strong believer comfort kills success, right? And if you are really passionate about an area or really want to learn, you have the ability as a lawyer to get that done. I got my views also on the fashion and sports sides of law where it's not just about law. And I strongly believe industry comes in. You need to be a lawyer who mixes with industry. And that's hugely important in emerging areas of law, including tech.
How much how much significance do you put into the industry know-how and commercial awareness? Because the other day I was telling someone that in some areas or in some transactions, you actually have to manage the parties and the needs of the business itself more than the word of law or the law itself.
I
So
think it's
what are your views?
huge. And I think the successful lawyer and those who, law's multifaceted. Knowing the law is just part of the job. Those who go on to succeed do very well. They're able to close deals. They can bring in the confidence of their client. They are able to kind of give that holding hand when the client needs most, not just by telling them about law, but they have an interpersonal skill set. So law's not just about knowing the law. And you're absolutely right that the kind of commercial acumen, the knowing the business. When a client comes to you in sports or fashion or tech, you need to be tech savvy, or they need to see you as somebody who knows the area around fashion, or has a vested interest in sports. And not every lawyer does, don't get me wrong, and they might practice the area. But I think in these less traditional areas of law, and you'll see many people who are involved do have a background in that industry or mix in that industry. It's not an area of law that can simply be, cordoned off and you just know the
Yeah.
law. I think it's hugely important.
Imagine a sports lawyer doing football tribunals or football arbitration, cast bat in basketball or any other in the sports dispute resolution or contracts, and they don't even watch the game or they don't even like the game. And at one point,
They're just doing it because to do it. And I just think full stop in law, whether it's sports or fashion, don't do law just for status or for money or for title, right? And especially don't do areas like the practical areas such as the sports or the fashion just for title, because you'll get bored so easily. Law's continuously learning, continuously evolving. And you're very right. If you're representing in a tribunal or if you're speaking to an athlete, you need to know the rules of the game. You need to understand the same way you would if you're undertaking a transaction. You need to understand the mechanisms of how this is going to happen. And you put yourself in the client's shoes, right? Even as litigators, before I cross-examine, I know my client's industry. I've done site visits often in the past and really got to know the inside working, because that's the best way to be able to represent the client. Same in fashion or sports. You need to be on the scene, part of the game.
and it probably also helps, like as you were speaking, it's something popped into my mind. It also probably helps sometimes knowing. I know it's a bit irrelevant sometimes in law or tribe in front of tribunals, but why your client acted in this way, or why they did what they did, or
Absolutely.
why the club. If you know the industry very well, you probably know why the club just gave up on that player, or they don't want that player anymore, or they offered him on the transfer window. It probably helps, but there's even a bit another industry which is very much highly technical, which is construction, and people just avoid it because it is highly technical, and it's one of the industries you cannot do if you're not technical. You can't do it just for the status and full stop. And you
And
mentioned
I'm one of those people who kept away from construction for many years because I didn't like the word. I didn't understand the whole, delay, quantum. I
delay,
found it very,
disruption.
very
Yeah.
technical. But the minute I started to see construction as a contract and then kind of departmentalize that, you have the contract and then you have the reasons why the contract fell away, whether it was delay or quantum, and you have experts who deal with that. Suddenly construction becomes contract. It's not that difficult because you follow the rules of what's supposed to have happened. Did it happen, for example? I'm talking now procedurally, before you get to a hearing, that, did the contracts take place the way they were supposed to? Were variations asked for in the right way? Were payments made? Engineers' decisions? You just need to follow the rule book. And the technical side, you know what? You can get experts on board. So it's funny because I laugh with friends saying I kept away from construction for so long because it was like, ooh, that's too technical for me. But when I have a mindset change and see it, well, it's just a contract, really, isn't it? And I can get to the bottom of the contract, then you are able to kind of get involved.
It's like tax law as well. I
Tax
think
I'll
we're
keep
just
away from. I
analyzing.
think I'll keep
Oh,
away.
I think we're just analyzing every law industry and how bad it sounded and how different it was in practice. But you also mentioned tech savvy, and yesterday I met a lady who said something very important, and she said that nowadays you cannot go back into the traditional industries or even the traditional way of working, and if you do not have an entrepreneurial mindset or if you're not tech savvy, and then you do not sustain in your industry. How much of relevance, how relevant is this in our practice as lawyers?
I think it's hugely relevant. I think people don't give credence to where we're at and where we're going. And the world has changed in so many aspects in terms of, the tech, the AI, and what's already happening and what's coming. And I know that because having been a lawyer for 25 years, I've seen the changes over the years and rapidly in the last couple of years, especially, right? I think is tech going to overtake us? No, but those who don't work with it, yes, it will absolutely overtake them. So being the ability to be able to work with tech and work with AI is like it's like someone, I don't know, coming to interview with you and they say, well, I don't really know how to use Word, or I don't know about PowerPoint, or I don't know about Excel. We take it as granted that our associates, our juniors should know how to, work their way around a screen and a computer. And I think we can now take it, or we should take it for granted that juniors, or we should teach them, should know their way around AI and tech, because some of the junior work and some of the kind of, mass work that can easily be done by AI is going to be done by AI. And I'll give an example. 25 years ago, when I had my first job in law, I was a paralegal on huge litigation in London. And there's about 100 of us paralegals at this time. And you know what our job was? We had those, you're probably too young to remember, we had old PCs that had these green glaring screens. And we had to scroll through lots and lots of disclosure documentation. And we had to pick out words that we were told to find and then write that down and then give that to the partner to say we
They
found it
probably
in that document. They
they
paid
probably do it
paralegals
now. They
in,
probably do
in
it
two
now
seconds.
in 2 seconds.
And we had two huge roomfuls of paralegals being paid daily and clients being charged by the hour. Now, that's a thing of the past. Drafting contracts, as in from scratch, thing of the past. We were taught, this is how to, and we have the templates that are online and everybody's used them. But now AI will give you that template. Yes, you have to check it 1,000%, but it's a thing of the past to do it from scratch.
And I think I wrote something once on LinkedIn, and it was because there's always this debate. I think I'd like to ask you the question: how long do you think this debate and discussion will last for on whether AI will take on the legal practice and how much we should change, how we should adapt, what we should adapt to? Do you think, like, will it last for 10 years, or as long as AI is evolving, we'll keep asking the same question? How long
I
until we
I
understand?
think the questions now are actually for knowledge sharing because it's already here. It's no longer a question of is it happening? Is it going to happen? Do we
It
need to do
is
it? That
happening.
that phase has gone. We are there. We are in the midst of it. It's happening. It's happened. And now the debates or the talks about, okay, how far do we embrace it? What do we need to do to be on top of our game? What should we not be doing? What are the ethical uses? What are the right platforms? So that question of do we need to or do we not is gone. And anyone who's still having that discussion needs to catch up to
Outdated.
where we're actually at. Totally. And I think as
So,
people get comfortable with it, and as we have kind of, for example, LLMs or tools that are specific for lawyers, and still yet, there's some that are around for, certain disciplines of law, but we don't have a one tool that fits all yet. And, people are rapidly kind of working on these. And soon it will become a thing of the past to talk about, well, is it needed? Is more people are going to educate themselves on how to use it and get better versions of it. But do we need it or is it needed? That anyone who's having that discussion, needs to kind of play catch up.
get your software update. Uh,
100%.
okay, but so now that we've established it is happening, and our whole idea of what we're discussing right now is multi-practice and lawyers who work around a bit of everything. How do you think that the rise of AI and legal tech is actually affecting multi-practice or multi-practice models in firms?
I don't think it's affecting it. I think it assists it. I think it actually gives the ability to other lawyers who haven't perhaps thought about doing other
Mm,
areas. It's a tool that helps them do that.
mm,
Now, what we know is the lawyer who blindly relies on AI is totally wrong. You cannot do that ever, right? And we've seen both in the US recently, even in the UK, where there's quite some serious sanctions for those lawyers who just, rely on AI, which still hallucinates and, makes up cases as it goes
I
along.
think you've seen it.
It doesn't have the ethical responsibilities. Yes, there was something recently in the UK High Court, right? So you see that and it's a lesson learned, and it's something that I took back to the juniors in our firm and said, this is, guys, exactly why you can never blindly rely on AI. And as lawyers, we have a duty not only to our clients, but professionally and ethically to ensure, even if we are using anything that's AI generated, that every single case, citation, reference to law is checked, right? And it's not made up. So I think there's still a huge responsibility. On the multi-practice, I think those lawyers who want to educate themselves, know about different areas, AI can massively help them, actually. But they need to obviously do the homework and make sure that they are, not blindly relying on these tools. And who knows, I predict maybe one day in the future, the tools and the algorithms and the input will be so sophisticated that we can rely on it. And we can actually say, I've relied on AI. And, the same way you can rely on a textbook, right? You can get a reputable textbook of law and you can quote from it. We allow our students to quote from it when they do their exams, because that textbook, it's an authority that is vetted. Is AI going to become that authority where it's so kind of able that we can blindly rely on it? Who knows? I'm not going to rule that out in the future. We're certainly not there yet.
And I think for lawyers, if we're going to include this industry know-how, it's important that we see how at one point our clients used AI, not just how we use AI. Because I think sometimes they might use AI and it might get them into trouble or probably ruin what they've been doing.
I
And
read something on LinkedIn the other day where they said, I wish our clients would stop using AI, because instead of getting a brief saying, can you draft this SPA? Can you draft the SPA which shows StockX should be diluted at blah, blah? And they've just made up some AI thing and you think that's, really cool instructions, and it doesn't make any sense. So, it's kind of funny how AI is, being used by individuals to kind of replace just logical reasoning as well, or instructions.
And if you don't do it that way, they think you're not doing your job correctly because I told them so.
But and like the other thing, look, clients are, a lot of my clients anyway, they are tech savvy. They do know, and they won't kind of say, well, we're going to pay X amount, for you to do that kind of work. That you've got templates that you can use to begin with. Clients are not silly. The clients, know how AI can be used, and I think we'll get to a stage where in the future, not too distant future, clients will expect that we are using it. We disclose that we use it, and it cuts their bills to some degree. I think we're headed there. I think traditional methods of how lawyers can, I am the font of all knowledge. I'm going to, charge you hours and hours on an hourly rate to do something which actually I can halve by using sophisticated tools. Clients are going to pull you out on it. And those law firms who are using it, those departments who are using it, those lawyers who are using it are going to be a step ahead of the game.
Mm. And do you think like a lot of ethical considerations come with it?
Many, 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 many. So, as I've already outlined, that the problem with AI, it's just grown so exponentially, not like any other area of law, right? It's just, it's not had a kind of linear growth. It's just gone crazy, right? So the problem with that is the regulation hasn't at all been able to catch up, and people have stepped away from it, saying until this is regulated, until we know what we're doing, we're very unsure about what we're doing. So I think the growth of it in itself just shows how important it is today.
I probably started this podcast very strongly without any introductions, and I just came right at you with the question.
It's fine. I'm used to that.
But Uh, but it would probably make so much more sense if you told the people why you multi-practice. Why do you think it's a good thing? And when did
I'm
it start happening with you?
So I'm by background, I'm a barrister from the UK, and I always did litigation in the UK, and I advocated. And I advocated different areas of law. I did employment, I did immigration, I did commercial. So from the beginning, as a barrister, I did different areas of law, right, in a kind of common law set, and then I moved to a commercial set. So I always had an interest to learn, and I don't like to limit myself. I'm also somebody who probably has about 50 things going on at once. If I've just got 3 things in the diary in terms of my to-do list, I feel like I'm not working. So I've got constantly kind of, on the go. And if my mind is forever kind of ticking over working, and I enjoy learning and I enjoy challenging myself. So when I had the opportunity to kind of, well, I opened my own law firm, but and I didn't just do advocacy then, or I didn't just do kind of disputes, and started to do, other areas that traditionally maybe solicitors would do. So for example, setting up a company. There's a protocol, there's a list, there's a bunch of documents, and you upload it. It's not rocket science, right? And then kind of, I had an interest a few years ago in the tech side because I like to try and foresee areas rather than follow what everyone else is doing. I think we create our own opportunities, and the opportunities are those that are starting off. People think it's crazy, and then everybody follows after a few years when it becomes more mainstream, right? So tech, I was talking about, I don't know, 5 years ago at the ICC in Nigeria, and I was talking about the metaverse, and it was above people's heads. Like they were like, she's crazy. Like, what is she talking about? This whole new world. But then I live it. I have young children, and I kind of watch how they think and what they do. They've been living in AR, VR for years, slaying dragons with Oculuses on. I walk in the room, and my son has got these weird glasses on, and
These glasses.
yeah, and I'm like, what are you doing? And I'm talking years ago. He's like, I'm slaying dragons. Okay, and I just forget. So when I look at that generation and I look at the future, I see a very different way of doing things, right? I see a very different, natural, seamless transition into areas like tech. So I think lawyers need to be adaptable and change, and you don't just stick to one rut. I have a huge interest in fashion and sports. I did sports law in the UK as well, but not like, specialized to any degree. I did investigations. I was involved with clubs, etc. But it's an interest of mine. So what did I do about it? I don't just rock up on LinkedIn and say, hi, I do sports or I do fashion. I make sure I know the area inside out before I do that. I enrolled on a fashion law course 3 years ago in Milan, or 2 years ago. And I worked at night because I couldn't during the day. I had, my own court work to do. I had businesses to run, the practice run. I had children. I was on vacation. But I put in the 4 or 5 hours I needed each night. I aced exams. I got like
To know the
97%.
ABCs of, yeah, to know
Yeah,
just at least the ABCs of fashion law, and then the
the
continuous
continuing.
learning.
And it was because I was so vested and interested, and I was top of the class, and I didn't attend many lectures. I was doing it all online. But that just goes to show, if you really are vested and really interested, you can do it. And that kind of came full circle. I'm now teaching at that same, institute, or the institute, another
Amazing.
institute that's with the same. So it can be done.
Amazing.
So this multi-practice, and you can do it at the top levels, right? You don't have to. Sports law, I wrote the module for the LLB students in a university here, second year students on sports law, and it was accredited by London. Now, you need to have a knowledge and ability. So that's me as a disputes lawyer, just giving you a slight in on how tech, fashion, sports, I've
And
maneuvered and done it.
I think it also it gives institutions the feeling that this person is credible if like institutions or clients know that this lawyer worked in X industry, they excelled, and then they worked in Y industry, and then they excelled, and then it would be almost certain that if this lawyer works in Z industry, they would excel. So that's why you probably have this credibility that you've built. And I think studying a law course at a later stage and late in your career, or probably when you're at the top levels, it brings back the enthusiastic student in you
Of
and
course.
wanting to
I
be
love
on
being
top
on
of
campus. I teach at the university here. I teach in Al Faisal, a university in Riyadh. I love being on campus. It's nostalgic. It does take you back to, 25 years ago where it all started. But also, I just think, writing and reading about writing and teaching on an area of law also gives you that credibility. And someone very, very wise told me that many, many years ago, that Sarah never kind of stopped doing academia as well, because all of us can practice law, but when we're teaching law, when we're writing about law, when we're speaking about law like this, then you're seen to be a leader in your field, because you can't get it wrong. You have to know your stuff to do that. So I think that gives an air of credibility. And going back to your point of different kind of experiences, when we look at a tribunal, I'm looking at now an arbitration, you have people from industry, right? And even in courtrooms, you have a judge who just knows law. He or she have gone to law school and being a lawyer and then start sitting as a judge. That's how it works in the UK. But when you have an arbitration and you're in a specialist area, or you need to know about industry, who do we bring on the panel? They're not all lawyers. You have people from industry. You have the engineers on a construction contract. You have people from industry on the maritime. Why?
you have the
Because
university.
they bring that experience. And that experience and that knowledge is important. So I think there's a lot to be said about, and because they've worked in that industry. So there's a lot to be said about being involved in an industry, even as a lawyer, or having a passion for something, because it's not just law, right? And that's important.
And I heard something from one of like a law professor. He was giving a seminar on contract law in London probably a month or two ago, and he said something along the lines of what lawyers draft in their contracts and what parties meant are sometimes two completely different things. Because
Absolutely.
and I think that's because we or some lawyers lack the industry knowledge, and they do not precisely know what the parties need in that transaction or what they meant by
What they want.
what they
You, you,
want and
yeah.
what you write and what you draft in the clause,
Good
because it
contract
affects
lawyers
interpretation.
Good contract lawyers should draft to reflect their client's intention and to incentivize the other party to sign. And the amount of clients who say to me, deals don't get done because of lawyers. Lawyers come in and they just complicate things too much. They don't do what they're asked to do. And I understand lawyers, we have to ensure regulation, we have to ensure law is met. But sometimes we overcomplicate matters. And someone also said to me that the best way in law, we might end on this, is KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And it's true. The best lawyers make the most difficult matters simple. The best lawyers in court, the best drafters are able to put something that you might need 3 paragraphs on into 2 sentences, and it makes sense and it's watertight. So there's something about simplicity and not kind of bogging down your clients or courts or others with, fancy Latin and fancy legal words. Your clients gain trust in you when you speak their language and you're straight, you're direct, and they can understand you. So there's something about simplicity in law that is missed, and people think, we have to act like, we're a walking dictionary or know all these fancy terms to get the buy-in of clients. Those days are done.
While all we need is to keep it simple. And I think we'll end on this: keep it simple, stupid,
Keep
correct?
it simple, stupid. KISS. And I laughed, but I think it's correct. Like, keep it simple, stupid. Okay.
To all the lawyers over there watching us, at some
We
point,
send a
keep it
kiss.
simple, stupid. And
Yeah.
we send a kiss to you. Uh, Thank you so much, Sarah. It was
It
a
was my
pleasure
pleasure. Thank you to
talking
you
to
all.
you.
Thank you to HAQQ. I had a great time with you guys in Beirut Arbitration Week, and your coverage was phenomenal. And I love watching your success rising from strength to strength. What you're doing for the community is essential, and we're very proud of what you do, and behind you all the way, and love to see you rising. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. It's our pleasure. Uh, See you soon, hopefully, and take care.
Thanks, Issa. See you. Bye bye.
See you. Bye bye.